The stranger in room 17. It was a rainy Monday morning. When Nurse Ellen arrived at Sunrise Medical Center, the parking lot shimmered with puddles, the sky gray and low, and the air carried the heavy silence that usually came before something important. She pulled her coat tight around her, already soaked through, and made her way inside. Elena was known by everyone on the floor kind, quiet, and always calm, even when things got tough. She'd worked the night shift before, but this week she was on mornings. Something about today felt different. She just didn't know why. Elena had been a nurse for 8 years. She had seen the worst and the best of people, broken bones, broken hearts, children fighting for their lives, and old souls breathing their last. She did her work with love and care. She was also used to being overlooked. She was one of the only black nurses in her department. Many patients called her sweetheart or girl instead of using her name. Some doctors barely acknowledged her, but she didn't let it change her. She believed kindness was not weakness. She believed patience could be powerful. That morning, her supervisor handed her a chart and whispered, "Room 17." The patient asked for privacy. VIP status. Elena nodded. She didn't ask questions. She just did her job. She knocked gently on the door of room 17, then pushed it open with a soft smile. A man sat by the window. He wore a gray hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face. He was alone, silent, but something about him was familiar. The way he sat, his hands resting on his knees, his posture straight even though he seemed tired. She gave a soft greeting. Double quotes. "Good morning. I'm Elena. I'll be your nurse today." He turned slowly, and for a moment, her breath caught. It was Keanu Reeves, older, quieter, with more lines around his eyes, but unmistakable. He gave her a small, polite nod. "Hi," he said. "Thank you for being here." She didn't react with shock. She didn't scream or ask for pictures. She just smiled and checked his chart like she would with anyone else. Inside, though, her heart was racing. She had watched his movies growing up. His calm presence had comforted her during hard nights. And now, here he was, vulnerable, real, human. "We'll take good care of you," she said softly. Keanu gave a slight smile. "I know you will." She noticed his leg was bandaged, and his face looked pale. Nothing too alarming, but he was clearly in pain. She moved around the room gently, checking monitors, adjusting his blanket, offering him water. She didn't ask why he was there. She didn't need to. Then the door swung open. "Drive," Bradley stormed in, clipboard in hand, eyes glued to his tablet. He was one of the newer surgeons at the hospital, sharp, confident, but always in a rush. He barely looked at patients, and he never looked at nurses. "Who prepped 17?" he asked without looking up. Elena stepped forward. "I did, sir." He finally glanced at her, his face tightening. "You? No offense, but I need this done right. This is a VIP case. I can't have mistakes." Keanu's eyes lifted slightly. He watched quietly from the bed. Elena stood still. Her voice stayed calm. "Everything's ready. Vitals are stable. Blood work was delivered an hour ago." "Doctor." Bradley shook his head. "I've seen your notes before. They're messy. You miss things. Let the other nurse handle this from now on." A quiet pause filled the room. Elena's hands didn't shake, but her heart did. She wanted to defend herself, to say she worked twice as hard just to be treated half as well. But she stayed professional. She nodded once, understood. She turned to leave, but Keanu spoke. "No," he said gently. "Drive." Bradley blinked. "Excuse me." "She stays," Keanu said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. "I want her here." "Doctor." Bradley frowned. "Sir, I think it's best if—" Keanu looked directly at him. "I trust her." Elena turned slowly, surprised. She met Keanu's eyes. He nodded at her, and it felt like the ground shifted just a little. In that one moment, someone saw her, not as a nurse to be dismissed, not as a black woman to be talked over, but as a human being with value. Drive. Bradley stiffened. "Fine," he muttered, then stormed out. The door closed behind him. Keanu looked at Elena and said, "You okay?" She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you. You didn't need my help," he said. "But I couldn't let that go." She gave him a small smile. Not many would have stepped in. Maybe more should. They sat in silence. For a while, the rain tapped softly on the window. Elena returned to her tasks, working with quiet focus. But inside, something had changed. Someone powerful had seen her not as a background worker, not as someone to be ignored, but as someone who mattered. And she had no idea that this moment was only the beginning. Keanu Reeves had come here in secret, but his presence would soon shake the hospital in ways no one could expect. And Elena? She was about to become the center of a story that would test her strength, break her heart, and remind the world what true dignity looks like. Asterisk whispers behind doors after the moment in room 17. Word spread quietly through the halls. Not everyone knew who the patient was, but a few nurses began to guess. Someone saw the name K. Reeves on a file. Someone else mentioned a familiar voice. And by the time lunch rolled around, most of the third floor had a theory, even if no one dared to confirm it out loud. Nurse Elena tried to go on like everything was normal. She kept her steps steady, her voice calm, her hands steady as she checked charts and delivered medications. But inside, she was shaken, not because of who he was, but because of how it felt to be defended, even for just a moment. That afternoon, as she walked into the staff lounge for a quick break, she overheard two nurses talking near the coffee machine. They didn't see her at first. "I heard Dr. Bradley got told off in front of a patient," one said, laughing softly. "By who? You won't believe it. Keanu Reeves. He's in room 17. Seriously? Number wonder there's security. Downstairs. Yeah, and guess who he defended, Elena?" The other nurse lowered her voice. "Her. Weird choice. She's nice, but kind of plain." Elena stepped back before they noticed her. The voices stung a little, not because they were cruel, but because they were said like truth, like something people believed without even thinking, like she was always going to be the background. Later, when she returned to room 17, she carried herself with quiet grace. Keanu was resting, but his eyes opened as she entered. She checked his chart and adjusted his for gently. He watched her with calm interest. "You look tired," he said. She smiled faintly. "Long day." He studied her for a moment. "I'm sorry you have to deal with that kind of thing. I've seen it before. Too many times." She looked down. "You've seen worse, maybe, but that doesn't make it right." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with understanding. "Can I ask you something?" Keanu said. "Of course. Why are you still here? In a place where people treat you like you don't belong?" She thought for a long time before answering. "Because I do belong. They just don't see it yet. But the patients do. That's what matters." Keanu nodded slowly. "That's powerful. I try to remember that even when no one notices me, I still make a difference. I'm not here for attention, but you deserve respect," he said. Their eyes met again, and something passed between them: mutual respect, quiet strength, a shared sense of what it meant to keep going even when the world tried to shrink you. Later that day, Dr. Bradley returned with a cooler tone in his voice. He addressed Keanu directly, avoiding eye contact with Elena. "We've reviewed your scans. You've got a hairline fracture near the femur. Nothing that requires surgery yet, but you'll need rest. I'd recommend staying off that leg for a few days. And I've arranged a physical therapist." Keanu nodded. Then Dr. Bradley turned to Elena for the first time that day. "Please make sure he's scheduled for the follow-up on Friday." Elena noted the time, but said nothing. Drive. Bradley was trying to act like the morning never happened. He didn't apologize, but he didn't snap either. He was watching Keanu now, trying to be careful. After the doctor left, Keanu chuckled softly. "He's different now. You're kind of hard to ignore," Elena said with a tiny grin. As the hours passed, something strange began to happen. Elena noticed more staff peeking into room 17. A few doctors, who never smiled at her before, gave her polite nods. And by the end of her shift, someone even complimented her notes. But Elena didn't let it get to her. She knew it wasn't real. It wasn't about her. It was about who was watching her now. That night, after her shift, she stayed behind in the hallway. She looked out the window at the city below, lights glowing softly in the misty rain. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Elena." She turned. It was Keanu. leaning slightly on a cane, dressed now in a plain black jacket and jeans, ready to go home. "You're not supposed to be walking yet," she said, surprised. He smiled. "Just stretching. They're sending a car for me. You should be resting." "I will. But before I go, I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For treating me like a person. Not like a celebrity, not like a case, but just a human. That's how I treat everyone." She said gently, "I know, that's what makes you rare." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the hospital fading behind them. "If you ever need anything," he said quietly, "you have a friend." "Thank you," she said. "But you already gave me something better." "What's that?" "You reminded me I'm not invisible." He gave her one last nod, then turned and walked away slowly. Elena watched him go. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just felt something shift inside her, a quiet spark of power. The kind that grows when you're seen, truly seen, for who you are. But just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her supervisor. "Please report to our tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your conduct during the Reeves case." Her heart sank. And once again, everything changed. Behind the closed door. Next morning, the air in the hospital felt colder than usual. Nurse Elena walked through the front doors with a straight back and a quiet heart. But something inside her felt heavy. She had barely slept. The message from HR had haunted her all night. She kept asking herself, what did I do wrong? The memory of yesterday kept replaying in her mind. She hadn't broken any rules. She had simply stood there, done her job, and been treated with basic human respect. But now, it seemed like that small shift had triggered something behind closed doors. When she reached our office, the receptionist gave her a stiff nod and told her to wait. The room smelled of old papers and stale coffee. Minutes passed. Then the door creaked open, and a tall woman in a gray suit stepped out. "Nurse Elena?" she asked politely. Elena stood. "Yes, ma'am, please come in." Inside the small office, there was a desk, a single chair, and a glass of water already waiting. The woman sat down, folded her hands, and began speaking in a tone that was too calm to be kind. "We've received some feedback from the medical staff regarding your interaction with patient KeanuReeves." Elena nodded slowly. "Yes, some have suggested that your conduct may have created confusion in the chain of command." Bradley reported feeling undermined during the treatment discussion. Elena blinked. "I didn't question his authority. The patient simply asked for me to stay." The HR officer didn't look surprised. "Be that as it may, we're concerned about how this might reflect on the hospital's image, especially now that the identity of the patient has leaked." Elena took a deep breath. "I didn't leak anything. I treated him the same way I treat every patient." "We're not accusing you of anything specific," the woman said quickly. "But we do want to remind you of your role. It's important to avoid unnecessary visibility." "Unnecessary visibility?" Elena asked softly, her voice trembling just a little. The woman hesitated. "You're a valued member of our team, but discretion is key." Elena left the meeting in silence. Her feet carried her down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the break room, until she found herself alone in the empty stairwell. She sat down on the cold step and let the silence wrap around her. This wasn't new. It wasn't the first time she had been made to feel small, but this time hurt more. Because for a moment, she had believed something had changed. Across town, KeanuReeves sat quietly in his hotel suite, sipping tea and watching the news. A small headline ran across the bottom of the screen. "Celebrity spotted at local hospital, staff reportedly shaken by unexpected visit." He frowned. Not because of the media attention. He was used to that. But because something didn't feel right. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his assistant. "Can you find out what happened to Nurse Elena? She was the one who helped me. Something's off." Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Elena returned to her duties. Her shift was quiet. The other nurses treated her a little differently now. Some smiled with tight lips. Some avoided her eyes. The whispers followed her like shadows. At the end of her shift, she sat in the locker room, staring at her badge. Her hands trembled slightly as she thought about quitting. What was the point of staying in a place where standing tall brought punishment? But just then, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hey, it's Keanu. Hope you're okay. I'd like to talk. If you're open to it. Elena stared at the message. Her first thought was that it had to be fake. But then another message came. I meant what I said. You're not invisible. I want to help. Please call me. She hesitated. Then, with a shaky breath, she tapped the call button. Keanu picked up immediately. Elena? His voice was calm, steady. Yes, it's me. Thank you for calling. I don't want to make things harder for you. But I heard about the meeting. It's okay, she said quietly. I should have expected it. No, you shouldn't have, he said firmly. You did your job. You did it better than anyone. You treated me with respect, and you stood tall. That should be rewarded, not punished. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken that way to her, not in all her years at the hospital. I want to ask you something, he continued. Would you meet me tomorrow for coffee? Somewhere quiet. Not about anything official. I just want to hear your story. She paused. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm sure it's the right one. Elena agreed. The next morning, they met at a small cafe by the lake. It was early, and only a few people were around. Keanu wore a cap and sunglasses, but it wasn't hard to recognize him. They sat at a table in the corner, and for a while, they just talked about life, about struggle, about growing up feeling like you had to work twice as hard just to be seen. Elena told him about her mother, a nurse who had died from an infection caught during a night shift. She told him how she'd always dreamed of helping others, just like her mother did, but she also told him about the moment she wanted to quit, about the stares, the silence, the weight of being different in a place where everyone pretended they didn't see color. Keanu listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said quietly, You have more strength than most people I've ever met. She looked down. Sometimes I don't feel strong. I just feel tired. He nodded. Tired is not weakness. It means you've been carrying something heavy for too long. Then he smiled. What if I could help you carry it? Elena looked up. What do you mean? Just trust me, he said. You'll see. And though she didn't know what he meant, something in his voice made her believe him. What she didn't know was that while they sat in that quiet cafe, Keanu's team was already working behind the scenes. Calls were being made. Names were being listed. Cameras were being set up. He wasn't going to let the world look away this time. Not when someone like Elena deserved to be seen. The news nobody expected. Just 2 days after their meeting at the cafe, the hospital break room was buzzing again. The nurses whispered over paper coffee cups, some with worry, some with curiosity, and a few with something close to panic. Elena walked in quietly, her heart still heavy, but her face calm. She could feel the eyes on her. She could feel the weight of unspoken questions, but she kept her head up. She was used to being talked about. She just wasn't used to mattering enough to be the center of it. She had no idea that something huge was about to happen. At exactly 10 in the morning, every TV screen in the hospital cafeteria and waiting area suddenly changed. The regular health news and hospital announcements disappeared. Instead, a video started playing. The logo was simple, just the name of a well-known humanitarian foundation in small letters. And then a soft voice began to speak. The video opened with Keanu Reeves sitting on a stool in front of a dark background. He looked into the camera with a quiet strength. A few days ago, he began. I was treated at a hospital by someone whose name most people would never know. A nurse, a woman who showed me what care really looks like. As he spoke, images flashed across the screen, photos of Elena helping him, caught quietly on a hospital security feed. The moment when she checked his phone. The moment she stood quietly as Dr. Bradley dismissed her, and then the moment Keanu spoke up for her. This woman's name is Elena, he continued, and she didn't ask for attention. She didn't seek credit, but I believe people like her should be seen, should be honored, and should never be punished for doing the right thing. The room froze. Nurses dropped their cups. A doctor's mouth hung open, and Elena, she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. So today, Keanu's voice continued, I'm launching a program in her name, the Elena Initiative. It's designed to support and protect underrepresented nurses across the country, especially those who are often overlooked, We will provide scholarships, legal support, and mental health care for nurses facing workplace injustice. Elena covered her mouth with both hands, and to Sunrise Medical Center, Keanu added, his voice still gentle, I ask you to take a look how your staff are treated, and how often the quiet heroes go unseen. Then the screen faded to black. Silence followed. No one spoke. And then, slowly, everyone turned to look at Elena. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know what to do, what to say. It felt like her heart was beating outside her chest. She had never asked for this, never imagined it, never even dared to dream it. A nurse walked up to her and whispered, Elena, you're on the NG, the world's talking about you. At first, Elena wanted to run, to hide. But instead, she stood up straight, not proud, not angry, just calm, grounded, real. Then came the knock on the staff room door. It was the hospital director. He looked nervous, very nervous. Elena, he said, could you come to my office? We need to talk. Her heart sank again, but she nodded. In the office, the mood was different now. The director smiled too much. The HR officer from before was there too, this time holding a folder and offering her tea. We want to apologize for the misunderstanding earlier this week, the director said. Elena didn't speak. We'd also like to offer you a position on the staff training team, he added, smiling wider. You've become an inspiration, and we believe your story can help us improve our culture. Elena looked at him, then at the HR officer, then back again. I'm not interested in being used as a symbol, she said softly. I just want respect. Real respect. The director blinked. Of course, absolutely. Then start with this, she said. Acknowledge what happened, publicly. Apologize to every nurse who has been dismissed or ignored here. Not just me. They hesitated. If you want to change, she said, start by admitting what needs to change. The officer nodded. Slowly, we can arrange a public statement. Good, Elena said. Then maybe we'll talk. As she left the office, she felt lighter, not because she had won, not because they had suddenly become good people, but because she had finally spoken from her power. No fear, no shame, just truth. By the time she walked back into the hallway, her phone was vibrating non-stop. Messages from people she hadn't seen in years, strangers thanking her, media requests, interview offers. But one message stood out. It was from Keanu. You were brilliant and brave. I hope you know that. She smiled. Then another surprise came. A woman in a nurse's uniform ran up to her near the elevator. She looked about 20, nervous and full of emotion. Elena, she asked breathlessly. Yes, I'm in my final year of nursing school. I just saw the video. You have no idea what you just did for people like me. Elena took her hand gently. Then go out there and be the kind of nurse you were meant to be. That night, Elena sat on her couch, the lights low, the TV off, just quiet. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She didn't want fame. But now, her story was echoing across cities, hospitals, classrooms, and somewhere deep inside, she knew something had shifted. Not just for her, but for so many others. And she also knew this wasn't the end. Because the system she had stood against was still standing. And change doesn't come in a single day. It comes when you keep standing, even when your legs shake. Asterisk. When silence breaks, a full week had passed since Keanu's video went viral. News channels replayed the message every hour. Social media overflowed with support, stories from other nurses, and praise for Elena. Hashtags like #NurseElena and #SeenFinally were trending across the country. But inside Sunrise Medical Center, things were more complicated. Some staff changed their tone around Elena, offering smiles, compliments, even awkward apologies. But she knew the difference between true respect and polite fear. She didn't want to be treated like a celebrity. She wanted to be treated like a professional, like someone who belonged, like someone who didn't need a movie star to prove her worth. She also began receiving letters from nurses across the country. Some told her they had almost quit. Some said they cried when they saw the video. One wrote, "For the first time, someone who looks like me was seen standing strong and not breaking." Elena read each message slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks in the quiet of her apartment. She saved them all in a little folder titled Why I Stay. But not everyone was happy. One morning, she entered the nurse's station to find her locker door wide open. Her name tag was missing. Someone had thrown her lunch on the floor. There was no note, no name. Just silence. She stood there staring at the mess. No one said a word. A few nurses looked away. A few looked down. She picked up the spilled container, wiped it quietly, and placed it in the trash. Then she straightened her shoulders. The next hour, she walked into the staff meeting and spoke for the first time. I know not all of you agree with what happened, she said gently. Some of you think I didn't earn this attention, that I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. She looked around the room, her voice steady. But this wasn't about luck. This was about truth. I didn't speak for fame. I spoke because I was tired of being silent. One of the older nurses shifted in her chair uncomfortably. A young male nurse looked away. You don't have to like me, Elena continued, but you should respect the fact that I have worked here just as hard as any of you. And none of us should have to rely on someone famous to be treated like we matter. Someone clapped. Then another. And slowly, the room filled with soft applause. After the meeting, one nurse stopped her in the hallway. Maria, quiet, always polite, but distant. I used to think it was safer to keep my head down, Maria said. But now, I don't want to be invisible anymore either. That night, Elena got a call from Keanu. I saw the footage, he said. You spoke from the heart. I'm proud of you. Thank you. She whispered, but there's something more I wanted to do. Tell me. I want to tell their stories, she said. The other nurses, the quiet ones, the ones who never got a chance. Keanu paused, then said, I'll help, whatever you need. The next day, they launched a video series. Elena would sit with different nurses across the country, hear their stories, and let them speak, not just about race or injustice, but about life, about why they chose to stay in this job when it gets so hard, about who inspired them, about what they hope for. The first episode aired 1 week later. The internet exploded with love. One nurse, an older black woman from Georgia, said, We carry people's pain, but no one sees ours. Now, maybe they will. Another, a young Filipino nurse from Los Angeles, shared how he was always told to be quiet and not make waves. Now, he said, I'm proud to stand a little taller. But while the world outside was celebrating, a storm was brewing inside Sunrise Medical Center. Bradley had stayed mostly silent through the weeks, but he was angry, not just because of the attention on Elena, but because the board had begun asking questions about his conduct, about how often nurses under him had left, about how many complaints were filed quietly and then buried. And one day, he snapped. Elena was walking down the hall, reviewing a chart, when she heard him raise his voice in the doctor's lounge. She's turning this hospital into a circus, he barked. This isn't about justice, it's about attention. Another doctor tried to calm him, but he slammed his coffee on the counter and stormed out. As he passed Elena in the hallway, their eyes met. For a moment, everything was still. Then he leaned in and muttered, You think you've won, but people like you always fade. The spotlight doesn't last forever. Elena didn't respond with anger. She simply said, I don't need a spotlight. I only need truth. He scoffed and walked away. But someone had heard everything. A patient nearby, an elderly woman in a wheelchair, wheeled herself closer to Elena and whispered, Don't listen to him. You're the reason I trust this place again. Elena knelt down beside her and held her hand. Thank you. And as she walked away, she whispered to herself, This is why I stay. But the truth was, the pressure was growing, not just from people like Dr. Bradley, but from the media, from expectations, from the weight of being a symbol. And deep inside, Elena started to wonder, how long could she keep standing before something gave way? The final shift. Sky was dark with thunder when Elena arrived at Sunrise Medical Center. For what would be her most unforgettable shift, lightning flashed in the distance, and the wind howled through the parking lot. It was as if the weather knew what was coming. But Elena walked through the storm without an umbrella, head held high, heart steady. Inside, the hospital felt different. It had been a month since Keanu's video, a month since the Elena initiative was launched, The video series had reached millions. Nurses across the country had begun sharing their stories, and suddenly the world was listening. But inside the hospital walls, change moved slower. There were cracks showing, now policies being reviewed, new training sessions added, staff being held accountable, but beneath it all, resistance lingered like dust in the corners. And today, something big was coming. Elena had been asked to attend a hospital board meeting. For the first time in her career, she had been invited to speak, not as a token, not as a nurse filling a seat, but as a voice that could no longer be ignored. She wore her cleanest uniform, her badge shined in the light, and in her pocket, she carried a folded piece of paper, her speech, her truth. Before the meeting, she made her usual rounds. In room 3, she comforted a boy recovering from surgery. In room 11, she held an old man's hand as he cried over his wife's photo. In room 6, she reminded a young mother that healing takes time. She didn't know it, but 3 patients asked for her by name that morning. Then, just after noon, she stepped into the boardroom. It was a long table, polished, cold, surrounded by serious faces. Drive. Bradley was there, arms crossed, the HR officer, the hospital director, and 2 members from the national board. Visiting from out of town, the director cleared his throat. "Nurse Elena, thank you for joining us." She nodded. "Thank you for the invitation. We've all seen the impact of your story," said one board member. "We want to hear directly from you." Elena took a breath. She unfolded the paper, and then, without reading it, she placed it on the table and spoke from her heart. "I didn't ask to be a symbol," she said. "I never wanted cameras or headlines. I just wanted to do my job, to be treated like I mattered, and for the patients under my care to be safe, not just physically, but emotionally, with dignity." She looked at each person in the room. "But every time I was ignored, talked down to, or made small, I wondered how many others went through the same and never said a word." "Doctor." Bradley shifted uncomfortably when Keanu Reeves spoke up for me. She continued. "People listened, but that shouldn't be the standard. We shouldn't need a famous voice to validate the voices of those who serve every day in silence." She paused. "If this hospital truly wants to change, start by listening to your nurses, not just during crises, not just when it's good for your image, but always." The room was quiet. The director cleared his throat again. "We hear you. And moving forward, we're establishing a council of nurses led by you, who will advise on patient care, staff treatment, and policy improvements." Elena blinked. "Me, yes," the board member added. "Your leadership has already started something we can't ignore. We'd be honored if you accepted." Her heart thudded in her chest. "I accept," she said softly, "but only if it's real change." The director nodded. "It will be." "Doctor." Bradley muttered something under his breath. "Dr. Bradley," said one board member sharply, "you'll also be placed under review. We've had several concerns brought to light. Your treatment of staff will be investigated thoroughly." His face turned pale. Elena looked at him not with hate, but with calm strength. "This was never personal," she said. "This was about what's right." That evening, as the sun finally pushed through the storm clouds, Elena stepped outside the hospital and found Keanu waiting near the entrance. He wore no disguise. People stared, but he didn't care. "You did it," he said with a smile. "Not alone." She replied. "How do you feel?" "Not like a hero," she said. "Just like me. For the first time in a long time, I feel like me." He nodded. "That's enough, more than enough." They walked along the sidewalk, talking about simple things, books, music, the weather, and for the first time in weeks, Elena felt light. The next morning, Keanu released one final video. This time, it featured dozens of nurses from different states, and at the center Elena. Not polished, not scripted. Just honest. She spoke directly to the camera. "You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't need fame to have power. You only need to be seen, really seen. And if no one sees you, speak anyway, because someone will. And they might change everything." The video went viral within hours, but Elena wasn't watching. She was back in her scrubs, in room 8, holding the hand of a woman scared of her diagnosis. "You're not alone," she whispered, and she meant it, because now she wasn't alone either. Her story had reached millions. But it had also brought her something deeper. Respect. Hope. And a place where she no longer had to fight just to be seen.